Hello, 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 and welcome to this, our TemTeam Cup, May Edition. We've got a fantastic setup here. Unlike what the notification identifier there says, it is in fact Trot versus Shizenix today. So, once again, getting into this. Fantastic thing to see here. Obviously, Trot's been bringing the flames with his current team. I haven't wound up seeing anything of what Shizenix has been bringing to the stages of late, so I'll be interested in seeing how that winds up going. I have it on good word that we won't be waiting too long for our contestants to get into their respective matches, so that should be a very interesting thing to see. Obviously, Trot having continued to tear it up with the combination of an aggressive Madrid team with a bit of stodgy toxics inside there, as is his wont, and of course the illustrious Mastion. Definitely a fun thing to take note of right there. Just gonna wait for all of our respective players to show up. Just looks like we're waiting a little bit on Shizenix to invite Trot. Given we only have 2 minutes before everything goes down, we won't be waiting long, folks, but I'll thank you all for your patience. Definitely looks like we're going to have an action-packed day today. After this, in roughly an hour and a half after this, we wind up seeing Shizenix versus Axolotus, and then straight down the line we have Shizenix versus Gold, Lukleel versus Zukli, Gold versus Axolotus, Cielo Aoi versus Rishi, and of course Tsubaki-chan versus Friesen, rounding off our evening. That should be a pretty interesting set overall. So, things to then look at here is just when our fine folks get in. I'm still interested in how Shizenix has changed up their team. Obviously, one fun thing about these group stages is that every single player in between weeks is allowed to mix up their team and submit a new one, allowing them a bit more versatility into their opponents, and it gives a higher chance for a lot of mind games. It can be very entertaining indeed. So, with that, we're just going to wait for both of our contestants to enter the field of honor. We only got 1 minute left before the match deadline, so we won't be waiting too long there. Speaking of which, if you're interested in how things have gone, remember that there's an exclamation standings power thing going on there in chat, alongside a couple other wonderful little commands that will give you more information about the TemTeam Cup and what's going on. So, should be very interesting thing to see. Once again, in case things haven't been updated on any things there, this is of course Trotter versus Shizenix, so if you've been rused by the notification, do not worry, this isn't a rerun. But with that, we won't be waiting too long before Shizenix and Trot get into their game, given as the hour has struck. So, we'll just be waiting for... I'm going to actually see if Shizenix is currently online, see if we're going to wind up getting any delays on that end. Always a wise thing to double check. And no, it looks like both of our competitors are currently awake, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and ready to enter. So we're just going to wait on both of them to ready up, all things considered. Yeah, I'm scratching my head. I haven't seen much of what Shizenix has brought recently. Obviously, Shizenix is a pretty sublime mid-range player from Exotic French. Has made real waves in the past with Raikan. I don't really know whether they're still going to be going for like a Firekoish-styled aggro team, or whether they joined a bunch of the people that have been going KYN, the Kinu Yaller Naga, that has been such a tough core for a lot of people to break. All right, and we are in. So with this, as we look at both sides here, we do see that Shizenix does have... Oh, this is nice. It's kind of middle of the road between those. We see, of course, the Naga Ragnet, a very powerful combo in there. We see, of course, the Amphitheater alongside the Tulkin and the Barnshee as some good wind threats. The OCR in there. Nice sort of mixed aggression from that, with the Nidrasil and the Mashuk providing a bit of stodge. This could even be a Terrorless Mashuk, adding that much more aggression as a potential inside that. Trotter's team, of course, we still have the two fires in Mastio and Hedgen. We've got some stodgy toxics in the form of Calibus and Adoraboros. We have Mentals in the form of Adoraboros Nagais. We have, of course, the terrifying Nature Koish. We have a lot of different things on display here, and of course, the ever-frightening Mudrid. Definitely going to be interesting to bear witness to into this. I think the Mudrid might be a little out of place here, just given the number of waters coming and natures coming out of Shizenix's side, but you know what? I've been wrong about that kind of an assessment before. The Nidrasil looks like it will be a powerful pickup, however, for Shizenix. It's outside of course, the lava wave from Trot. There's not too much that's going to be hitting hard enough into that to stop it from really walling the vast majority of Trot's lineup. We actually see Shizenix hover over the ban for Mudrid there, but no, he goes for the Nagais. Nagai's always a good pickup for your opponent to ban if you're worried about it messing with your tempo. And given that Shizenix is rocking his own Nagais, he definitely doesn't want to have to deal with that. So with that, we go into our first ban for Trot, and it looks like he's hovering over that Ragnet, but that could easily just be him considering before he goes into something else. I know he's banned Mashuk in the past. Mashuk is something he doesn't necessarily like, even though he does have tools into that. I think the Amphitheater is potentially not bad, but the Nidrasil, the Nidrasil feels pretty reasonable. No, he goes for the Mashuk. So, with this, the next thing that we can wind up seeing here is what is Shizenix's first pick. Honestly, I feel like Nidrasil is still pretty easy for him to slot in here. Even when you're afraid of the Mastio, you've got a lot of things to cover that. Like Nidrasil OCR here feels pretty hard to check. We do see the Calibus come out alongside the Mastio, meaning that we do get Lava Wave synergy alongside some juicy Toxic Inks, potentially rendering that OCR a bit harder to pick on Shizenix's side. We'll have to see what he goes for there. We could even see a Barnshee. I don't actually object to Barnshee there, giving good wind pressure in against the Calibus, while at the same time having good offenses into the comparatively low special defense Mastio. One of the biggest hindrances of Mastio is its lackluster special bulk. So with that, we do have our two leads, Nid Barnshee versus Calibus Mastio. Some pretty oddball lineups here in comparison to the usual fare that we wind up seeing as we enter our second bans. So second bans, we do just see the Nagais go right out the gate. That's pretty understandable. Decidora is no joke, especially when you don't have your own Naga to try to check that. So that's definitely something to bear in mind there. So, the other thing that we can wind up seeing here is, we do see a Mudrid ban. The number of electrics on Shizenix's side, something he doesn't really want to be caught off guard with from those crystal attacks, from the, Mudrid, and on top of that, of course, we do still have the Dust Vortex and the Mud Shower, all of which are really, those are hardcore moves. So we do see the Nature Koish come out, despite the Nidrasil being an option that's open to Shizenix. Interesting, alongside the Adoraboros, this means that we could very well see just a, Oh, actually, this is really good. Because Trot has counterpick here as orange side, he does have the ability to tailor whether he wants Yukama or Hedgen, both of which could be valuable into Shizenix respectively, depending on what Shizenix picks. If he picks the OCR here, then it's more reasonable for him to go Yukama, because that still hits into a bunch of other things there. But we do see the Amphitheater go out there, and he still goes Yukama, going for that water cannon synergy alongside the rest of his team, and making sure that he has one more thing to turn on the water cutting lily synergy for his Koish. Always a viable option there. So with that, we enter our first game. As we look between these leads, honestly, while it's a bit of a knife fight, I do still favor the aggression out of Trot here, because the other thing that I'm concerned about is nothing stopping him from just going screaming into this Barnshee. A double in on the Barnshee slot here really puts Shizenix at a disadvantage. He wants to conserve his wind threats for a lot of this front and back line, and getting one Hypoxia off onto the Calibus, while that's good, I don't think that's great in the grand scheme of things. Nidrasil doesn't do enough to Mastion, I think. And if we're looking at a double in of like a Toxic Ink and also a Hypoxia onto the Calibus, that's a little frustrating too. What we could see, of course, is just a hard double into the Mastion slot instead. I don't know how well Mastion takes that. I'm pretty sure it lives, but the poison takes might actually take it down depending on how frail it is. I just haven't seen enough of the defenses of this Mastion to be able to effectively say. What I do believe, though, is that the 3 Prio is going to outspeed anything that Nidrasil does, and Trot likely expecting the Nidrasil to swap into something like maybe a Tulkin, maybe the Amphitheater, something else to be spooky there. Maybe the Ragnet. Ragnet feels a little better there, because then you get the electric pressure and then you don't just die to the same lava wave you might be fearing. But I do expect Trot to go for the Barnshee there. Now that said, all of this said and done, the Hypoxia will still hit like a ton of bricks. We still have another wind in the back. I think Shizenix can just afford to leave the Barnshee in here and YOLO with it, which does appear to be what we see. We see the Ragnet come in on Shizenix's side, definitely setting things up there. We see a wind burst actually onto the Mastion that deals an astonishing amount of damage, but the lava wave comes screaming in, taking this Barnshee down to 14.3%. If this is the double, in which it is, then the Barnshee may have done a ton of damage to that Mastion, but it came at a significant cost. I don't know how comfortable a trade that was. What this does mean, however, is that Tulkin can come in on this board now and still threaten the Mastion. It doesn't die in the same way. And then you also get the burn off on the Calibus. So that's not terrible. Oh, wait, you don't get the burn on that either. This is a total whiff thanks to the Mucus. I keep forgetting Mucus ignores burn and freeze. And like, the fun thing about Mucus is it's just like 4 kind of good effects. An additional resistance to Toxic, an additional resistance to Electric of 30% each, and then also immunity to 2 relatively important status conditions. Those are all really good when you bash them all together and put them on a Tem. And that's precisely what we see right now. With this in mind, we have to remember that there is every possibility that Ice Stalactites is up on this Calibus, meaning that it will slap back. Now, the next question with that is, does the Charged Iron Filings come down first? We see a cage come down instead. So hopefully Trot was prepared for this. It looks like he was. He tends to not blink into potential cages as he gets wind bursted, eats it, and then just lava waves into the Ragnet. Is this just a double in on Ragnet this turn, I wonder? We do see the Toxic Ink come down there as well, as the combination of these two things does free the Ragnet thanks to the Seized, which overlaps the cage from the Ragnet, but it also does a really significant amount of damage to that. It lives at just under 10%. Sorry, just around 10%. It's like 11% off of that, something like. But it's real close to death. But real close does not mean a death. Now granted, Ragnet has no Nagais to give it super speed, so unless this thing's packing Piezoelectric Blow, it's not going to be the most valuable thing in the world. We don't see any swaps here. The Tornado comes down into the Mastion, and it will be taking it out. The Hand Fan from the Tulkin securing that KO, a very important one too. The Hypnosis comes down into the Calibus, recognizing that it does not have Energy Drink due to the fact that it's had a reactive vial that did pop, so that's a good bit of control brought back from Shizenix there. The one challenge that I have here is that there's a Nature Quash. Nature Quash would be really frustrating into this board. Honestly, so would Yukama, and with the with the Ragnet so unbelievably low, Trot sees this as his chance to start pushing back with it. Definitely something that, while an Amphitheater and an Idrisil distinctly favor this, there's still tools that Trot has available for that. I do think, though, that losing the Mastion was a bit of a bad spot for Trot there. Obviously, the cage, something that Shizenix definitely wanted to do there, making sure that the Fire Tem was eliminated so that way this Amphitheater could feel a bit more free. Now, we still, of course, have a Ouroboros, but a Ouroboros, despite its very strong special defense stat, does not want to necessarily be taking Sparks-boosted Thunder Strikes off of that Amphitheater. But if this Ragnet goes down, that's going to be a significant advantage there. My assumption, however, is that probably Nidrasil swaps in here. Nidrasil being the easier to take down of the, well, sorry, like slightly less important, but still threatening into Trot, Toxic that Shizenix has available. Like, It goes a bunch of directions, I suppose is what I'm talking about there, but Nidrasil is slightly more expendable than the Amphitheater, which is just so valuable into the late game, taking care of both the Yukama and the Adoro. When you've got this Nidrasil to sort of whittle them down first and take less damage from that Calibus, which is still kind of, it's just vibing. We see the Tulkin actually swap for the Amphitheater, so Shizenix might be saying, "Por qué no los dos" here, as that does appear to be what's happening, as we do see both the Amphitheater and the Nidrasil swap in, just keeping his Tulkin safe in the back, anticipating the Water Cannon into the Ragnet. Yeah, honestly, this board looks pretty good. The other thing that this does is it stops the Adoraboros from just, like, coming in, which feels really nice. My big concern for this, though, is that, Calibus still eats this and can throw damage into Amphitheater, and there's no real comfortable swap in to that outside of Nidrasil, and Nidrasil just blew its load. So the fact that Nidrasil's already out here means that it can't really swap in defensively again. Yukama gets out of dodge. It cannot take both a Plague and a Toxic Ink. We see the Adoraboros come in anyways, as the Bright Beam will come down, doing double damage to both. It's got a feeble base power, but it's still something. The Toxic Ink does still do a reasonable amount to Adoraboros, given the fact that it's a resist based on its horrible defense, and the Evade, once again, just doing Trotter dirty. A number of times now he's been in a situation where just he's been having to deal with evades that are coming off of Tems that are higher speed than what he actually wants to deal with, and this is no exception. We saw it versus Gold, we saw it here. Fortunately, Bright Beam has hold, so we can't see Amphitheater just continue to use that, but that was an important reposition, as now the Thunderstrike can come down, and that's pretty ruinous into the Adoraboros there. It's likely that the Adoraboros will still outspeed us. We do see the Synergy Master, Virulent Gust, slam into the Amphitheater, and the even the Nidrasil going down to 65% from that is still pretty important. However, with the Calibus slapped again, like this Hypno control's getting real out of Shizenix there. Nidrasil proving its worth as a comparatively to other bulky Tem speedy Hypno user. Which, yeah, no, those are really important elements. I have no idea the speed tiering of this Nidrasil, of course. I'm assuming that it's not overwhelmingly fast because the Adoraboros is outspeeding it, but for all we know, all of these Tems are speed crept, because the speed differential between a lot of these Tems is pretty significant. Calibus being unbelievably slow, Amphitheater being literally the highest base speed Tem in the game at 110, and in the meantime, both Adoraboros and Nidrasil rocking pretty mediocre sets. If I double check those, which I totally will, then, Nidrasil, what's your base speed at these days? We're gonna quickly double check that. That's 61 base speed versus Adoraboros' base speed of 60. So this Adoraboros has to have at least some base speed in it. Well, sorry, some speed investment in it. Otherwise, it would not be going before this Nidrasil, which makes a lot of sense because Adoraboros kind of wants to go a bit fast to do its job, especially if you've got double Synergy Master Energy Manip to potentially back yourself up with. There's a lot of options. Still, though, I think Trot may want to keep this Adoraboros alive, and the problem with that is, if you're doing that, then you're also most likely dying with either your Yukama or your Koish. Now, whether that's a trade he actually wants to make here, I'm not entirely sure. I think he definitely wants to keep at least one of those waters to deal with the Tulkin, but the rest of this may yet fall down. The Nidrasil will be hard going, but Calibus, if left alone, like it's been... Currently, Shizenix's way of dealing with that has been Hypno Control, as he does sack the Adoro, it seems, willing to take the damage on that rather than risk the Tems in the back on a frustrating swap. So, while that's frustrating, I think that might still be the best option for him, because he does still have this Calibus here to try to clear things up. That was an overexertion from Amphitheater. Even with the relaxed proc, it's not going to be able to do anything this turn. That does signpost that it might yet be a swap in on that spot for something. If we see the Ragnet try to cheekily come in there and eat an attack for this anticipated Toxic Ink Water Cannon combo, that could be something right here. I don't think you just sort of straight up swap Tulkin on this. That feels pretty unreasonable when you actually want to kind of keep that alive, and it's still pretty, like, it's not the worst thing into the back line here. Amphitheater obviously is very important, but as long as there isn't an excessive amount of aggression on the Nidrasil, I think that Shizenix is fine with this board. Catlab is about the only thing that can knife fight Nidrasil, and it's been consistently being both slapped and incentivized to attack other slots, because obviously so many other things in Shizenix's other slot just go down to consistent toxic pressure. But as we've seen, the combination of evasion and hypnosis are just sapping turns from this poor Squiddy boy. We do see the Amphitheater swap rather than just sit in and eat those attacks, and it is the Ragnet as death fodder here, potentially just attempting to eat a little cheeky water cannon there, as we do see the Tulkin actually swap in as well. The Blizzard goes down into the Tulkin, predicting the Blizzard coming out there, as the Ragnet does go down to the Toxic Ink. This does mean that the Yukama now does not have the Blizzard online, but it does have Aquatic up for this Tulkin, and depending on what swaps in here, like, what I would do is probably just bring the Amphitheater in, so then you can plague the Yukama and then have the swap in potentially for the Nidrasil, but that might be leaving your Amphitheater a little too exposed. Instead, we see the Nidrasil swap-ins. This is guaranteeing the Toxic Ink this turn, but it comes at the cost of a lot of HP on Amphitheater. If we see just a double in on the Tulkin spot here, I don't see any way for Shizenix to avoid just losing his Amphitheater on the swap unless it's able to eat both of those attacks. Instead, he just straight up sacrifices his Tulkin as it goes down to the Aquatic Whirlwind, opting instead to trade the Tulkin for a solid blow on the Yukama. Problem is, I'm assuming that this Yukama will actually survive a single Toxic Ink, which it does even after ticks, meaning that we still will have the opportunity for one more attack or a forced attack into that spot from the Amphitheater. My concern, of course, for that as well is the fact that if Bright Beam is still up, which I believe it is still up since the last attack that happened, I believe was an overexertion on a Thunderstrike, that means that Amphitheater will be more than capable of finishing this Yukama solely through Bright Beam and Poison Ticks, which is mega awkward. There's every possibility, however, that Yukama will still outspeed this Nidrasil with Blizzard, and I don't think Shizenix really wants that. Like, the challenge at this point is, despite the control onto the Squid, it's still just really apocalyptic for Shizenix's game plan, and it may yet be a problem. Still, though, one thing that we can see here is that, Amphitheater can just Bright Beam, and that will just solve a lot of problems here. It could also just Plague or Thunderstrike. We see a Plague come down instead, ensuring triple prio, and I believe they run Handcuffs. They do run Handcuffs. This is pretty common on Amphitheaters these days, as the Hypnosis comes down again for additional control. Constant pressure into this Calibus, ensuring that it is locked down and unable to do the important damage that Trot wants it to do, giving this Amphitheater time to get back up from those low 30% ranges up to 77% thanks to these relaxed ticks. This is the power of relaxed if you're able to control the board like this. Forcing swaps, keeping Hypno control, getting evasion up, these are all tools that Amphitheater can use to get itself back into the game, and that's why it survives so often into the late game. So with this, honestly, Shizenix can bring this back still. My concern, obviously, is the high speed of Yukama still means that it's going to be pretty good, easy for it to try to get a, good Blizzard off onto this Nidrasil, unless this Nidrasil is mega heckin' careful or fast. And while the former of those is likely, given Shizenix is a great player, I don't know about the latter. If you don't outspeed that Blizzard, what precisely is your counterplay against that outside of keeping the Amphitheater alive? This obviously means that for Trot, it's going to be easier for him to just throw damage as hard as possible into this Amphitheater, relying on the fact that it's only got so much stamina, and its stamina is generally its weakest link. Not being able to hit those hard high power moves as consistently as it wants, despite everything else. We could still see a Bright Beam this turn, but there's every likelihood that there's an outspeed. We see the Thunderstrike go down, actually waking up the Calibus, hoping that the Toxic Ink will in fact be enough to take it down alongside that, but overexerting the Amphitheater in the process. The Rainbow Guard coming down to defend against a Toxic Ink on the Nature Coicious side, as the Toxic Ink instead goes down onto the Calibus, but it does not KO it The Calibus actually resting because Trot, of course, didn't expect to be moving with this Calibus this turn. An unfortunate thing, you still want to obviously click those Toxic Inks when you can, but when you're down that low, there's kind of a dichotomy when you're asleep of, do I actually just rest here to try to get the HP off? Sorry, to try to get more stamina off, or do I just, not? And oh man, the energy drink alongside everything else, a common pickup on Nidrasil, means that a lot of the momentum of Trot goes down here along with this squid, losing the ability to deal with that. If that was just a Synergy Master charge into the Amphitheater, I feel like that would have been a much better play. In the meantime though, what's likely going to happen now is the Plague's going to land in on the Amphitheater. We will not get Synergy Master onto this Amphitheater from the Koish, and with that, Shizenix basically just runs away with this game, as we see the Plague in on the Yukama, knocking it down thanks to the high 3 prio and the, unparalleled base speed of Amphitheater. The Water Cutting Lily does go down, overexerting Koish, and sadly not doing enough damage to Amphitheater. That was still a lot of damage with War Drum and everything else, but the Synergy Master not being there means that that's not going to be able to do the damage that it wanted to. If those turns were less protective perhaps in Trot's previous plays, then perhaps this would be a different game, but as it stands, it goes to Shizenix. Quite the first game here, has to be said. With that, I'm obviously only going to be waiting for our contestants to go in again. If Trot's able to bring this back in the second game, obviously that will mean that that is a point to both in their current standings. If, of course, Shizenix takes the second game here, that means that that is 3 whole points to Shizenix inside this particular best of 2. That's how these things have been working with TemTeam Cup, so it's an important thing to bear in mind. The other thing, of course, inside all of this, I've only brushed on this sort of idly on the side, but rather than there being coin flips or anything like that, the only thing that is decided, both players inside of best of 2 get a chance to invite. That's one of the upsides of best of 2. The only question is who gets to invite first, who gets to invite second. So with that, we are getting straight into our second game. As we can see, Trot is respecting the Amphitheater this time, recognizing how much damage Thunderstrike does into his largely weak to nature and electric team. He's got key resists, but the problem with those is that Shizenix will effectively ban into them, and as we can see, that's been something of a concern for him in the last game. My next question is, will Shizenix just ban this Mastion? It did a lot of work for Trot. No, it looks like we're going to keep that Naga ban. He's hovering over it. Will the people get to see what they want? I know a lot of people have been looking to see this Nagais again in play, but we'll have to see from Shizenix whether Trot is allowed to play it. No, looks like we're hovering over the Mudred instead. That's not a bad first ban, but it does still leave a lot open for Trot. That does mean that we would get the potential of Nagais, Calibus or something like that, or a Nagai's Mastion. Nagai's Mastion is a pretty strong lead, actually. And ambiguous as well, like it can serve well for both traits. There's been some questions as to, within this match at least, what trait this Mastion is, what trait this Nagai's is. Mastion's always Pyromaniac. As much as I love the concept of Bully Mastion, no one's really gotten to it just because it's conditional, whereas Pyromaniac is not. It's just a solid 15% on fire moves. So we see the Calibus come out first, a strong opening from Trot. He definitely wants to first pick that before it gets taken out by Shizenix, and as we've seen previously, he's able to play around it in those openers and mess up the things that want to come in with it, pairing beautifully with the Mastion's Lava Wave. So Shizenix looks like he's going to be picking up the Mashuk as his first pick inside here. Obviously a good thing into a lot of Trot's lineup, but of course we do have 2 mentals there. We do have digital there in the form of Hedgen. There's a lot of counterplay available from Trot against that Mashuk. So it's just a solid Mashuk Barnshi. Barnshi was good last time and it'll be good here too. My only question is, will Shizenix recognize the fact that it's going to be going down in the same way? Trot instead opts for the Hedgen out the gate, so we won't be seeing that same aggression from the Mastion turn 1. We may see a bit more out of this Barnshi as a result. Obviously, we still have to respect the fact that this could still be a double in to Barnshi. We see the Nature Koish get banned out instead. Shizenix recognizing that that's still a pretty frightening thing into a lot of their lineup there. The OCR are not appreciating that. The Banshee not appreciating that. Actually, okay, my only question with that is, like, you still have your Nidrasil here. You still have the, I suppose we have Osiara, Nagai's, and Tolkien. None of those really want to be taking a lot of hits from Nature Koish, but we do see the Nagai's get picked. The people will see what they want, and we will find out for sure inside this match whether this is Deceitor or Water Custodian. So, in the meantime, though, we do see the Nidrasil come out here. This is pretty strong into a lot of what Trot has brought to bear. He doesn't have any doesn't have any winds to deal with that, but it looks like he might be going double. Yeah, he goes double fire, recognizing that the Nidrasil's just too much for him otherwise. And the final pick out of Shizenix is their Tolkien once again. So, Mashuk Banshee versus Hedgen Calibus. How is this first turn gonna go down? Not quite as combo-rific as the previous lead out of Trot, but at the same time, harmful microwaves from Gotta Go Fast is gonna absolutely sever this Mashuk's leg if it is tireless. So it's a good check for that. Usually if things are specially invested, then it's the kind of thing where you don't have the same kind of like, generally parriers are a bit more specially invested. They're built to, like, build into things, and they just sort of, like, are designed to survive your wind bursts and your tornadoes from esoteric threats. They usually try to have, like, a reactive vial or a sweatband in there, but it's entirely possible that this is tireless Mashuk. Those tend to be really just sort of aggro into their opponent. They wind up usually being very high attack and speed invested as a result of that to try to outspeed key threats. We actually see the Calibus bounce for the Nagai's this turn. Very interesting to see as the Plasma Beam goes down on the Banshee, and this is a very frail Banshee, as we can see from the wind burst damage from last time. The Air Specialist coming down there. The Wastewater actually confirming the KO on this Tukma Mask Nagai's. Sadly, the people will still be left wondering. Now, that said, obviously, given that frailty on that Nagai's, it is more likely to assume that it is a Water Custodian. Generally, one of the upsides of building Deceitora is that you wind up seeing some really powerful bulk in on Nagai's as a result of that. Still, though, what this did wind up keeping is just a bit more things alive on Trot's side. Obviously, the Plasma Beam's still going to be in terror in the night. There's still a lot of concerns for that on Shizenix's side of the board there. You can't really afford another hit like that on the Banshee, and you do most likely outspeed. Flash there proving to be very quick indeed. I believe it outspeeds the Banshee. And in the meantime, this Mashuk is now hard-walled by this Adoraboros, which really doesn't care too much about anything outside of the potential of a tireless proc taking advantage of its poor physical defenses. But typing-wise, it eats absolutely everything that this Mashuk is serving. So, with that in mind, we are going to see, I mean, okay, I assume that we could still see a pretty delicious tornado out of Banshee here. It depends on whether Shizenix is confident that they will outspeed this Hedgen or not. I do not believe they will keep this Banshee in if it doesn't outspeed. So, with that, my next question is, if that's swapping out to something else, what does it swap to? My assumption would be either Osiara or alternately Tolkien. Like, those two feel good to me into this board. Tolkien eats the potential of a Hellfire later on, and if we are seeing Mastion hop in here for whatever reason, that's fantastic. But additionally, the Osiara just does a lot to threaten our boy Hedgen here, which otherwise is kind of threatening to run away with this particular board state. With this in mind, both of our contestants taking their time thinking about their next moves. Never mind, I love it when I say that and we get straight into the thick of it, as the Mashuk actually swaps instead for the Tolkien, getting that heater out and trying to absorb some of these mental hits, recognizing that the Mashuk is a bit vulnerable there. The Tornado does outspeed the Hedgen, as that is a ton of damage slamming into this Adoraboros. The Tornado taking it down, even with double screen, down to 20%, even lower after the burn. Aloe Vera as well, very serious plays. The energy manipulation going down onto the Tolkien, still going to be a pretty good bit of damage there. I mean, you know, getting it down by like 20% or something like that, that's not terrible, but I don't know how good that was to eat that much of a tornado onto this Adoro. That said, I don't see anything else that Trot could have done to deal with that outside of just sort of sit there and take the lumps, because sadly, that is just the way it winds up being in those sorts of circumstances. My next concern, however, is that we have another tornado being threatened this turn with Shizenix's Tulkin. Obviously, right, so Flash doesn't want to stay in here, but at the same time, we have a bunch of wind pressure onto Trot's side. Calibus kind of wants to come in to eat some of these moves off of Osiara, but the thing is, Osiara could just straight up be Aquatic Whirlwinding Adoraboros here. It's entirely possible that we would just see that to conserve the priority and stamina on Tolkien, and then like tornado into things harder later on and just wind burst the predicted Calibus coming in. So we do see the energy manipulation come down. It looks like we're actually not going to be seeing any 3 prio. Well, okay, I don't expect this Osiara to be outsped by an Adoraboros at 3 prio at any time soon, as the wind burst is actually used to knock that out, and it's a blizzard onto the Calibus. It will take it down to 56%, and the reactive vial procs, bringing this Calibus up to 71.2%. Yes, this is one of the permutations that we could expect from that. Like, that was still pretty comfortable inside there. With this in mind, obviously, the big problem that Trot has is now you just don't have anything to eat this Aquatic Whirlwind. The Aquatic Whirlwind is going to come smashing into the Mastion on this side, and I don't see anything that can be done to stop that. Especially since the priority was maintained on OCR, it still has Aquatic Whirlwind available. There's no way that Trot will be outspeeding that, even with the Lava Wave out of Mastion. Not that that would be doing very much into an OCR anyways. Like, yeah, you're taking advantage of its frailty, but it's not like when we were seeing the hit into the Barnshee later on. Well, sorry, earlier. That's the one. I know times. Why, yes. Still, though, it looks like Shizenix is in an undeniably advantageous position here, having the ability to just throw water pressure into the other 2 spots there, as we actually see a double in? Is that a tornado, or is that just a tornado onto Mastion and then like a Serbatio's Wrath, conserving that priority once again, meaning that hedging cannot do anything once it hits the board there, as the Serbatio's Wrath still does a ton to this Calibus, thanks to, as people said, the nullification inside there. And additionally, we still see the Mastion go down thanks to that spread move. We've gone from what's undeniably advantageous to just a curb stomp right now, as it looks like the priority was conserved just to ensure that the Aquatic Whirlwind can come down like an absolute ton of bricks onto this Hedgeon before anything else happens on this board, meaning that all we have left is a Calibus at 30% and a prayer for Trot, and that's not going to be enough to take care of 4 hecking Tems on Shizenix's side. Shizenix coming in like a freight train, taking this game solidly, bringing the Calibus down to 5.9%. Sure, the Calibus is fighting back thanks to the nullification. They're making it able to absorb the wind burst, but at the same time, we have 2 full HP Toxics at the back. This is kind of a love tap from this Mashuk and this Nindrasil, and Trot goes down. With that, Trot does concede, and I would like to congratulate Shizenix once again for taking that game. Very well played indeed. Don't go away, folks. We will be taking a small break, but we do have, of course, a second game coming up here before we take some additional pauses here. As I've said before, we actually have a full lineup going all the way through our slots today. In roughly an hour, we will be having Shizenix versus Axolotus. After that, we have Shizenix versus Gold. After that, we have Lukleel versus Zukli. After that, we have Gold versus Axolotus. Cielo Aoi versus Rishi. And finally, Tsubaki-chan versus Friesen. So it's just going to be jam-packed for you guys today. One match after the other. We will be spacing them out, obviously, due to the scheduling that is available to TemTeam, as all of our matches are conferred and confirmed between our contestants before they're actually set up. After that, of course, then anyone who's available to officiate and everything like that comes in and makes sure that everything's hunky-dory. That's how we've been rolling this, and it's honestly been a really fun system to see. In the meantime, though, I will ask you guys to be patient and enjoy yourself, stretch your legs, have a good time in the meantime, as we will just be putting things on hold here for just a smidge. We'll be right back, folks. I mean, by right back, I mean an hour. So yeah, I do mean that there's like, you know, some time to stretch your legs. Still though, I will be back around that time. Hello, and welcome back, folks, to the TemTeam Cup May Edition. Once again, I'm Quarter, and I will be presenting to you none other than Shizenix versus Axolotus. Should be quite the game. We've seen Axolotus runs a very similar team to Trot's. Now, Trot obviously was rent asunder by Shizenix in the last game that we saw there. The combination of the various nature, toxic, and wind threats from Shizenix being just a bit too much for Trot to handle. Now, as I said, Axolotus is running a very similar team to Trot. So my question is, will the rubber band remain on the claws of Shizenix opponents here in terms of like dealing with what he's presented? We once again have some, like, if I recall correctly, Axolotus has an Ouroboros. They've got the Mudrid, so it's the same sort of thing there. Are we going to see a similar ban phase out of that? Obviously, there's a bit of variety in terms of Axolotus's entire, like, sort of actual lineup that I'll be kind enough to not immediately spoil for you fine viewers, but rest assured it's going to be an exciting time. So with that, we've just got a bit of time to wait before both of our contestants enter their next match. We've caught them just about a minute before everything goes down, but it should be quite the interesting one. As I said, like we've just seen how aggressive Shizenix's lineup is, despite having some like chunky things to fall back on in the form of the Nidrasil, in the form of the Amphitheater, which regains so much HP over time. It's still got so much else that it can go for there. With that, we are in game. And here we are, game one between Shizenix and Axolotus. And as we can see, Axolotus' team is abundantly similar. It's got that same sort of Crystal Deluge aggro concept as, of course, Trot's team has. Instead of Mastion, we have a Fire Koish. We also have less bulky Toxics inside there, and more just like, instead of a Calibus, we got an Osiara. We have a Volphy in there. A lot more sort of what one could consider to be conventional picks out of Axolotus that may well turn the tide here. I think, like, you know, Fire Koish Mooflank is going to fare a bit better into Shizenix's lineup here, especially given that you're also going to have a bit more of an ability to counter things like the Nidrasil's Hypnosis, which we saw a lot in that previous game. So, in the meantime, we get into our first bans, and one question is, what precisely is Shizenix going to be banning? We saw him target the Mudrid pretty consistently as a second ban. We might see a Kinu ban in our first part here, because obviously that's the sort of thing that you don't want to be dealing with as Shizenix, with not too many ways to burst through that unless you're just relying on like a tireless Mashuk or just the sheer power of your Sparks Amphitheater, but I'm not sure if I like those odds 100% of the time. The Volphy is, of course, another reasonable ban, but you have the Nidrasil for that. You've got Plague that goes into that fairly well. We do see the Mudrid as the first ban, so obviously this winds up protecting a lot of the Mentals and Electrics on Shizenix's side, both of which are pretty important there. He's got 4 things that die to Crystal. Not really nice to see. Certainly also frees up the Ragnet from being like sort of pinned down in a nightmarish fashion. Also, it kind of helps out the Tolkien, which doesn't really want to eat one of those Dust Vortexes like in any circumstance. So, as we get into this, we do see the Nagais as the first ban for Axolotus. Once again, if you're rocking a fast team that's got so many aggro components, it makes sense to first ban the Nagais, because Decidora absolutely destroys your capacity to reposition, your capacity to push, all of that. You're just kind of left at the fickle whims of Decidora, which is not an easy thing to take advantage of if you've gone so hard into speed. We do see the first pick of Mashuk out from Shizenix into this. This does still leave us with the potential threat of, like, I still kind of like Fire Koish Mooflank into this, weirdly enough, but I was also thinking, like, Kinu Barnsheep might actually just outspeed and kill this Mashuk, depending on the spreads that we see there. I don't expect the same thing from an Ouroboros there, for sure, but you never know, you never know. The problem with, of course, loading up on Mentals like that is that there's an Amphitheater here, there's a Ragnet here, both of which are more than willing to take advantage of that kind of a pressure. The other thing that this Mashuk does is it stops Axolotus from just smashing that Osiara button, which otherwise would be a very very potent opener. There's a lot of separate things that Shizenix can do to blunt that sword, though, so it's unlikely that we'll see that immediately be picked. We instead see Adoraboros and Volfi. So this, among other things, gives us Synergy Master Energy Manipulation, turn 1, which would be pretty frightening into Shizenix. Like, you don't really want that exhaust. So, other things that we can expect to see here. Okay, so we do see the Tulkun come out. Obviously, the heater blunting that first turn damage is very important there, and that's Windburst charging into the Adoraboros spot. Keeps the Mashuk a bit more protected. It's also a bit risky, Axolotus going for a Volfi into a Mashuk. If this is a tireless Mashuk, then we have the concern of, like, those are usually max attack. If this isn't a chunky Volfi, then it may very well have to deal with some very nightmarish damage coming out from that Mashuk. One Wastewater is still going to be very painful indeed. We see the Ragnet as the second ban out from Axolotus. This makes a lot of sense given the fact that that is one of the most significant threats to his board in a single Tem. It's not something that he can take out with Toxic either, like a couple of his other things. Or fire. Granted, we do see the Fire Quench bend in retaliation to that, seeing Shizenix seeing their weakness potentially to that Fire Quench coming in there. We do see the OCR and the move flank get picked up. Move flank's still pretty valuable inside a lot of this. Yes, you have to deal with the you still have to deal with the narcoleptic hit off the move flank, but that's I think you can probably deal with that. I kind of like Barnshi more than Kinu here, but both of those are pretty advantageous picks for Axolotus on the counter picks here. We do see the OCR get thumbed over, but it does turn into the Barnshi, meaning that wind pressure from the Barnshi might be a little bit less significant, given there are now 2 winds to try to blunt that damage. But we do see it get picked up anyways, as potentially a wind resist of Axolotus' own. With this, we get into our game 1. So, turn 1, this is definitely a Mexican standoff, sort of knife fighty kind of turn. The heater is really important here. Obviously, that's going to do a lot to stymie the aggression of Axolotus there, the Synergy Master being offset by minus 5% as net from the minus 30% damage that we see come out from that heater. So, this does mean that that energy manipulation is not going to clap nearly as many cheeks as one would want it to in this turn 1 against this Mashuk. This is not something you necessarily want when you're staring down a Mashuk as a Volfi. Like, I expect this Volfi to swap for Barnshi this turn. Alternate, yeah, no, I expect that, because the other side of this is you can probably take 1 Wind Burst as Adoraboros. The question is, how well do you take that? And if, as some people are curious in chat there, if you're looking to flex on that Psychic Collaborator for parts of this game, then you're going to want to keep your Adoraboros safe from a bloodthirsty Tulkun and a powerful Barnshi, both of which have been asserted to be monstrous special attackers on Shizenix's side of the field. A high base special attack of Tulkun, the devastating Airspec Hand Fan, Glass Cannon Barnshi that we saw there, absolutely devastating to some Tems. The Tornado bringing Trot's Adoraboros down to like 27% or something like that. Truly nightmarish, given the high special defense of Adoraboros. Like, that really tells you the numbers there, because Adoraboros has like 110 base special defense, one of the highest in the game. Like, as feeble as it is on the physical side, it is just a monster specially. The Adoraboros bounces as we see the Barnshi swap in to eat the potential Windburst coming down there. I mean, obviously it makes sense for there to be a Windburst coming down there. We see the handcuffs locking the Mashuk in place. The Windburst actually comes down onto the Volfi as the Wastewater is doubled into it. This is indeed a thick Volfi. It does not go down to this combination of attacks. The Mashuk is looking low as well. One interesting thing to note here is that a Wastewater will be a significant overexertion for this Mashuk, and the Strange Vest has been revealed. So Strange Vest Mashuk is a weird one and a wild one, because obviously if you're rocking Parrier, then that can be really wild to mess about with. We can assume, however, that this one's still a tireless Mashuk based on the fact that currently we're not, like, since he went straight for the jugular on the Wastewater rather than just going uppercut, that's usually one of the tells that we have for that. Uppercut generally doing more damage to a Volphy on average than Wastewater. You only click Wastewater if you still do stupid damage with that, and you want to get Tireless Brox up as fast as possible. Looks like we're just out of uppercut range at 24%, unless we see another plague come in there. But the tornado might well render that null and void, as it does actually just knock out this Mashuk before all said and done. Looks like we're going to see a standard 1-to-1 trade. Mashuk for Volphy here, as the Volphy does stay in, eats the tornado rather than let anything else take that, given there's only one wind resist on Axolotus' side, and the Volphy is not the most significant thing on that board. My only concern with this is nothing's been done to blunt the aggression of this Tulkun, and that Tulkun stopping Adoraboros from feeling like it's gonna have a good time on this field. Yes, there's the Amphitheater in the back. Yes, that's still absolutely monstrous, but that is one of the many things that's gonna be a problem here. Incidentally, one really cool thing in as we look into this is the fact that the Aloe Vera on Axolotus' Barnshee does mean that that was even more damage than one would expect there. That actually out damages by, I believe, 10% your standard hand fan variant. But it does mean that you only get that damage on Toxics, so that can be a bit of a double-edged sword there, as we do see the move flank come down next to the Barnshee, a bit more of an open pick into this Amphitheater, which if that had been the Adoraboros there, I mean, obviously then you're just dying from two things. That would have been very disadvantageous indeed, but the Osiara is also checked by the higher base speed of Amphitheater, being at 110 base speed. It does mean that the Plague is likely to outspeed if you've got any meaningful investment onto Amphitheater. So with this, we can kind of expect, like, if I'm Axolotus here, I want to target that Amphitheater as hard and fast as possible. But the problem is, how do you do that when you have so many things that are weak to electric? Like, you're kind of in that position where you can't reliably keep everything in that you want. So we do see the swap in here for the Thunderstrike to go onto the Adoro instead. How well does this Adoro take this? It's just under 50%. That might go down to a Windburst. It does not go down to a Windburst, but that looks like it'll go down to a stray glance, let alone a stiff breeze. 4.9% is in no way comfortable for this poor little sleepy dragon, as even, like, the double screen keeps it alive, if you can indeed call such a low percentage of HP living. If people are looking for the Psychic Collaborators this game, this may not be the one, because I don't think this is going to get anything outside of 3 priority, if that, because the Tornado is still online. Plague probably takes it down from here from the Amphitheater. I don't see how Axolotus is going to wind up making this thing happen. It 8 hits, but the problem is, I don't think if you're letting even one electric through, with the lineup that you had there, if the Volphy goes down to that, if the Volphy was there as a swap in to those electric hits, that would have been fantastic here. But the fact that the Volphy went down to the wind pressure was really frustrating, in my opinion, right? Because that means that now, like, all of this electric pressure is just really monstrous for Axolotus to deal with. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm belaboring the point here, but the chief business of it is this Amphitheater is looking to tear Axolotus in two, with only the move flank doing anything to not die to it. We do see Shizenix still swap out, though, in terms of that conserving it for a lot of the rest of the team, expecting a Goring onto that spot, which is still important, of course. Axolotus swaps out the Adoraboros, swapping back in the Barnshee, anticipating a wind move, as the Goring does go down into the Barnshee, and that still does a whopping 40.4%. That's pretty significant. We actually see the Adoraboros did not get targeted there at all, so we could have actually seen a Psycholab that turn. But, you know, at the same time, it's important to respect those kinds of finishing moves, and it's clear that Axolotus does not want to just discard their Adoraboros willy-nilly. That could actually still be a valuable wall breaker into something like Nidrasil if it still outspeeds like Trots did. But that also comes down to both, like, potentially the speed arrow, which is currently on Shizenix's side, and of course just the Nidrasil not outspeeding, since of course the base speed of 61 off a Nidrasil will outspeed a base speed Adoraboros. So you gotta have that speed investment in there if you're planning on taking advantage of that. Granted, since we are seeing, of course, the energy manipulation and things like that on Adoraboros, it stands to reason that Adoraboros does probably have some speed invest, but we don't know that for sure yet. In the meantime, so now, of course, this Mouflank's the thing that's threatened. The focal points have changed, but my other concern is, doesn't Ociara just swap into this? Like, it can totally do that, and then we still get like a beta burst or something like that from the Barnshee there, and then we're back to a position in which like a Cerbatio's Wrath can come down, which is not really what you want as Shizenix. Yes, you've got the reposition into Amphitheater and Yggdrasil, but you don't really want to be relying on that, because the Amphitheater is still going to be taking an absolute ton of damage into this, and I'm not entirely sure that that's something that you want to do as Shizenix. Now, I think you still just charge into that. I think double Tornado into that, or even just a Wind Burst should be enough. Actually, what we could see is like an Energy Manipulation Tornado, something like that, just because I don't think a single E-Manip takes down this Mouflank from that percentage. I think you have to at least threaten it, but the Wind is better against literally everything else on Axolotus' team, so you want to get a combination of those two things. With that in mind, the real question here is, does Shizenix pursue that as planned, or are we going to see some kind of a weird pivot to try to take care of the Barnshee, which is the main thing keeping this Yggdrasil off the field? Granted, we do, of course, have the Amphitheater to make sure that that dies later on, which, as I also keep saying, just it wipes out everything else that is not named Mouflank. This is why I expect the Mouflank to be focused, and it's also why I expect Axolotus to protect that Mouflank with his life, saving the Adoraboros' death fodder. It comes in, it eats the Tornado. Does this mean that we're going to wind up seeing an energy manipulation or a beta burst from this Barnshee? We actually do see the beta burst go down into Axolotus' Barnshee. That does do roughly 43.1%. This is not terrible. But now, of course, this does mean that we get the revenge kill hopping out here. The Ociara does not have hull, but what it does have is a whole lot of dangerous moves online and available. If this is the tsunami that I expect it to be, given that we do have synergy here, then there's no swap Shizenix can do that will protect both of his Tems coming in, but I think you just accept that chip damage. I think that's like not an unreasonable thing to anticipate as regards to that, right? So looking at this, just trying to think of what else is available. I do think you just hard swap into Amphitheater and Yggdrasil here. You just kind of let that be a thing, unless you're expecting the Mouflank to come back, but I think you want to conserve your Barnshee. Your Barnshee's low, but it does still have the potential. If you've got energy manipulation, doing fun things later on, you don't want it just going down to priority, because what's likely to happen this turn is like a tsunami energy manip. So if we are to see a tsunami energy manip, which would definitely devastate everything on that side of the field, and the energy manip would probably outspeed. The reason why I'm like suggesting a tsunami rather than just the aquatic is that the aquatic does nothing to Yggdrasil. And if we're expecting at least one Yggdrasil to swap in, then you don't want to just do something that could be 50-50 eaten entirely. So there we are. We see the Yggdrasil actually swap in on the Barnshee spot. The tsunami does come down here, and this takes out the Tolkien comfortably while conserving the HP of the Amphitheater, which is of course very important. This makes sense in terms of that. At this point, Tolkien's done its job. The things that are weak to Toxic have gone down. Sorry, the things that are weak to Wind have gone down. As in the meantime, this Yggdrasil still took a clap from that. I'm not sure it survives at 54% anything from, like, any blizzard from this Ociara. Of course, the problem that we have here now is the fact that this Amphitheater is ready to take advantage of the split attention that Axolotus is going to have to give to this. Either Barnshee basically goes down for free here, and that's a trade for the Yggdrasil, or potentially we see a bit of a damage split here, and the Yggdrasil winds up staying alive, which I think is one of the worst case scenarios for Axolotus. One fortunate thing here is that there's no way an electric attack is likely to outspeed the Tornado from Axolotus' Barnshee. So that is one thing that is safe there. Obviously, we could see a swap back into Barnshee here. That would be rude, but while being rude, it would also keep the thing that's a bit more important into, say, this Ociara alive. Yes, you still have the Amphitheater, but I think you want to conserve this board state for the late game. And the Barnshee, while very effective against that Mouflank, you still have a narcoleptic hit. You still have a lot of other options. With this in mind, it looks like our players are just about ready to go into things here. Oh, no, we're still taking our time. Right, so obviously the other question there is, does Axolotus swap out for the move flank on the Barnshee spot? I don't think that lives is the problem here, so that's why I don't like it. I think you just Suicide Tornado, try to get another KO out, and then use your move flank when it comes in, rather than anything else. Like, you pound into the nid spot, trying to keep your OCR alive, because your OCR at 100% probably does not go down to a single Thunder Strike, and you are likely to outspeed a Thunder Strike this turn. It would have to be a Plague to even come close to damage the OCR. And the OCR, even at 1 prio, is going to outspeed the Nitrosil. So the Nitrosil goes down either way. But the question is, how do you want to put that in? We do see the Tornado go down onto the Nitrosil. Shizenix does allow the Nitrosil to go down instead, like, not risking the Barnshee in the back. An interesting decision. Of course, the Barnshee will be probably going down to anything this turn. We could even see a Bright Beam. We do see a Bright Beam that does take down the Barnshee while getting a little bit of spread onto the OCR. The problem is, this does mean that Aquatic Whirlwind is still available onto the Barnshee next turn. We see a Cerbatio's Wrath on... Is that a Drill Ociara? It's a Drill Horse! I can't believe it. That is never something I expect to see on Ociara. But it's pretty powerful. Obviously, it's got the spread. It's got everything else there. And yeah, that spread might actually be the little deal sealer right here. Obviously, the Aquatic Whirlwind on the Barnshee is really powerful anyways. That's most likely going to outspeed it. But in the meantime, just getting that extra bit of damage onto Amphitheater, ensuring it doesn't get a relaxed turn, means it's that much harder for Shizenix here, as Axolotus is proving that he really has this match by the short hairs, as he closes this out pretty comfortably. Even though obviously you take the hard overexertion there, you're willing to lose your Ociara when you're guaranteed to bounce onto this Amphitheater using your superior goat, or indeed in this case Goring. Congratulations. And with that one sec, sorry. Just testing a couple overlays there, ladies and gentlemen. Still, though, that was quite an impressive showing from Axolotus. Let's see if they can keep that pace in the second game. There's one other thing I can generally note from Shizenix is that they're very willing to mix up their pick bans in order to maintain an actual steady lead. If something didn't wind up working the first time, they're not likely to do exactly the same thing again. Unless, of course, they're convinced that that was the entirely optimal matchup into that. I'm not entirely sure that they are, but that said, given that all through that, I was saying constantly like, oh man, this typing really favors Shizenix. This typing really favors Shizenix. The draft there was strong. Taking out the Volphy there was strong. The challenge came from the fact that Axolotus was able to take things back with the Ociara that just didn't get focus on it by appropriately conserving a lot of separate threats there. Just really good showing from Axolotus piloting that team into Shizenix. With that, we will of course be waiting for both of our contestants to be hopping into their next match. Axolotus will of course be inviting now, so we'll be specking from his side. And it looks like we are in game. Let's hop into it, folks. All right, here we are as we enter our second game between Axolotus and Shizenix. This should be a pretty interesting one. My next question, obviously, is do we see a similar ban and pick from both of these players? I kind of almost expect Axolotus to just straight up ban the Amphitheater and the Ragnet, but maybe I'm overestimating the need to ban Nagai. Well, underestimating the need to ban Nagais there, because of course Nagais is still really important. We do actually see the Ragnet first ban. This does mean that Nagai's Nidrasil is open to Shizenix, and this is kind of a spooky thing to just offer, unless you know you have an answer to it. The Toxic Ink outspeeding is obviously going to be a significant concern. We actually see the Adoro ban. This is not what we usually wind up seeing inside that kind of a matchup there. Like, one of the classic conventions when you're facing off against an Ouroboros is, you know, you ban the synergy partners. You ban the Kinu first, then you ban the Barnshee. Of course, the problem here is that Ouroboros gets that Gust synergy off of Ociara as well. It gets the Emanip synergy off of the Volphy. It gets the Gust synergy off the Firequosh as well. There's just too many things to ban. So in this instance, it just makes more sense to ban the Adoraboros itself. So sadly, we will not be seeing any Psychic Collaborators this game, as the adorable Sleepy Dragon is, well, out of this picture. Still though, that's a pretty good ban given how annoying it was as just a wall for a lot of these wind attacks into things, despite still being weak to those. The special defense truly excelling into Shizenix's team and taking a lot of important hits that could have gone into other Tems for a lot more damage than it had as a HP pool. We see a Firequosh, which definitely invites the Nagai's Nid combo that I was talking about earlier. It just feels so powerful into that Firequosh. The Firequosh feeling dead in comparison. One other thing that can help there, though, is the fact that we do, of course, have the Volphy. But my problem with that is... if you're going Volphy into this, you're basically just inviting Shizenix to trigger his reactive vial if that's what he's packing, because that's what a lot of people are packing on their Nagais. Instead, we do see the Barnshee. Alright, that definitely shakes things up here. It's possible that Axolotus' plan is to just ignore the Nagais for a turn, and instead just double into the Nidrasil slot, in which case, what we would be likely to see there... Okay, one big problem here is there's too many defensive swap-ins for fire and physical hits, right? Sure, the wind still smacks Mashuk around something fierce, and the fire still smacks around Amphitheater something fierce, but Token eats both of those, Ociara eats one of those. Token, if Token is banned here, that makes a lot of sense. But that's also inviting the double of the electrics to still, like, that still means we have one electric that's still going to be wreaking havoc on this game. I don't know if you really want to commit to that as Axolotus when we saw how weak his team was to electrics. The difference, of course, is now he has the Mudrid around. Obviously, that Mudrid still doesn't want to take a plague to the face, apropos of nothing, and it doesn't want to eat a Mashuk's uppercut either, but it is still a counter option against electric that was not available to Axolotus last game. Something to consider here, but it does look like we're drifting ever downwards towards that Tulkin, which would be an amazing defensive ban into this, but we see the Ociara get banned out instead, as it looks like, given the fact that we do not have guys on this team for like a Water Custodian or something like that, that makes sense to try to keep covered when you're facing off against things with a Mudrid. So this means that we could very well see something like a Kinu Mudrid here. That doesn't seem unreasonable into this lineup, given the fact that we still have wind, we still have a number of options into Shizenix's general composition, and since that Nagais is on the field, the move flank's looking a little less good, especially given the fact that we have the option of potentially two mentals into that. But no, we see a Kinu move flank. The Mudrid is left at home as Axolotus is charging into this without Crystal Deluge. With this, we do see the Barnshee get picked up as we are getting into our second game between Axolotus and Shizenix. Will this draft turn out differently, or will Axolotus take this game by the reins at the last minute again? How close precisely will this be? Well, obviously, this first turn heavily favors Shizenix. Even if you're planning to just double into that Nidrasil spot, you're basically offering a Madness buff up on a silver platter. There's very little you can do to counteract that, and that is a ton of momentum that you're just casually offering Shizenix inside this. The Nidrasil is also, of course, very, pretty much guaranteed to outspeed into Seadora with Toxic Ink, meaning that you're going to be taking that Toxic Ink on your Firequosh, which, while still good into a lot of the other things, still probably going to go down really low from that Toxic Ink. Not likely to be one-hit KO. Not a lot of things are actually one-hit KO'd in this game, but it really does not enjoy those. It, in fact, enjoys it so little that we see it swap out for the move flank instead, trying to make sure that that gets on there to absorb perhaps that Toxic Ink, but that does mean we will not be seeing a double in to that Nidrasil spot this turn. Perhaps weighing that, measuring that, and finding it wanting as a trade. Still though, the Hypoxia comes down like such a mighty force thanks to that Aloe Vera that it actually takes out the Nidrasil, whether that was teched maybe to live a Hypoxia from a weaker, inferior Barnshee, or one that was holding a hand fan instead, or just like a neutrality Barnshee, but those bonuses stacked together just wiped that Nidrasil off the board. Already, despite my sort of concerns during draft, Axolotus is charging into this game with a mighty force. Question is that mighty force enough to deal with Nagais without a Mudrid? So, I'm not sure about that is the problem. Obviously, Decidora being up here disincentivizes the Amphitheater pickup, which is the only electric currently available for Shizenix, meaning that this Barnshe is still probably going to be able to run away with things for a bit, but Barnshe still is a pretty reasonable swap in here, because that also turns on the Nagais' Fury synergy for Nagais, and it doubles up as a way to scare the absolute bejesus out of this move flank, because you don't also want to be considering a double up into that. Like, you're already dying to a Psy Surge. The concept of a Nagais' Fury into a Beta Burst into this board as well is pretty intimidating, but of course we do still have the Ociara as a potential defensive swap-in to a Nagais' Fury. Still, we could also, of course, see bait from Shizenix, but I don't think you can afford to go bait right now. I think you just have to, like, charge into this hardcore and try to take momentum back as Shizenix right now. So we'll see whether that ends up being the thing. We do see the Mashuk come down instead, potentially hoping to get a Wastewater out before the Barnshe into this. I'm not entirely sure, but this is another thing that does kind of half reek of bait to me, but the problem is there's no real appropriate defensive swap in, unless this is just like, please hypoxia me, and in return I swap into Amphitheater and try to eat that way. I don't know, that feels too transparent to be a play that Shizenix is actually going for there, but you never know. In the meantime, we still have... Oh, I think I see it now. Right, so what that Mashuk is doing is providing the counterbalance for Nagais' Fury this turn. So if we are seeing a Nagais' Fury this turn, and we see the Barnshe swap out, for instance, for the Ociara, then that does mean that the Ociara is just immediately hard threatened by the Wastewater coming in. It won't be able to take the combination of those hits after a Madness buff, because the Madness buffed Nagais' Fury, even without synergy, even onto an Ociara, that's still likely to do 40% at the very least. Ociaras are renowned for many things. Their bulk is not one of them, as I say to many people. But the combination of that and the Wastewater should absolutely body the poor horse if it chooses to come in on this Fury. We do see the move flank swap instead, so if this has been chosen, it is in fact the Kinu that swaps in, getting the Protector buff onto the Barnshe. Will this be targeted by the Wastewater is my next question there. We see the Nagais' Fury come down. Without synergy, it does still go into the Barnshe, which takes it, even with the Protector buff, down to 0. Okay, the sheer might of Shizenix's Mashuk turning things back very quickly here. We got 2 turns, 2 KOs, keeping us on our toes here. So obviously HP differential most definitely favors Shizenix this game. This is a weaker position just due to the fact that this Nagais is able to constantly output pressure here, and there's not much Axolotus can do at this point to try to retaliate. Like, the Kinu's on the board, but what's Kinu actually doing here? The Ociara is on the board. What's Ociara actually doing here? This is the problem when you don't first ban Nagais, is that, well, Nagais stomps all over your momentum, and when you're trying to play a speedy team, it's just such a nightmare. It's only 4 turns now, but it's 4 turns of hell and chaos as you're left with a disadvantage as hard as your speed investment, which, as we're seeing here, really adds up in a lot of these matches. The Wastewater being the Wastewater underspeeding the Barnshe being absolutely devilishly important there. We see the Fire Course come in again. I believe this is our 3rd turn of Decidora now, so this means that we will have 1 more after this. So this means there's, 2 more turns to survive. There's no, there's no Nagais' Fury this time, but there sure is a Psy Surge, which I'm pretty sure onto that Fire Quench alongside the Wastewater is going to be more than enough to take things down there. Like, you can leave the Kinu for last at this point. You still have plenty of things to take it out as you just rocket into the late game. Like, my concern here is that, I feel like if I was Axolotus, I needed to make sure that, like, I kept everything alive and just kept punching holes. Now that you're on the back foot, I really don't know how they're going to be able to take this back. the OCR is unable to come in. The fact that the Mashuk came in and was able to swing before the Barnshee did means that so much of the pressure for Axolotus is not available. That Aloe Vera Barnshee being such a mighty force that is currently obviously down. And that's actually so serious that we just see a concession there. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that stunned me. Definitely not something that I anticipated there. Axolotus seeing that he was caught by the short hairs and just tapping out rather than deal with the sheer force of Shizenix lead there. The Madness buff guys combined with the Mashuk just proving too much for Axolotus to go for. It's not often that we see early concessions like that, but I have to say that it didn't seem like there were a lot of outs there for Axolotus, and definitely it looks like they were regretting not banning that. Still, though, well played to Shizenix, well played to Axolotus regardless, as this does turn into a 1-1. This does mean that we will have 1 point to both of our contestants here. If you're looking for more matches, of course, don't go away. We still have plenty available later on. In 1 hour's time, it will be Shizenix versus Gold in a no-holds-barred beatdown that will still be very entertaining indeed, followed, of course, by Luke, Leal, and Zukli, Gold and Axolotus, Cielo, Aoi, and Rishi, and Tsubaki-chan and Srizen over the course of this day. So there's plenty of matches yet to be seen. With that in mind, though, we will be taking a short break. I will, in fact, be signing off here for a bit. As we will be rotating things around a bit on this side just to make sure that everything stays fresh and sparkly for you guys. With that in mind, I would like to thank everybody for stopping by. All the attention that people have managed to pay this fantastic tournament is very much appreciated. As in the meantime, I will thank everybody once again and hope that you all have a fantastic day. I've been Quarter, and it's been a pleasure.